I've been sitting on this for a while, mostly because every time I start typing it out my hands get a little shaky and I tell myself, nah, you're just being dramatic. But if this sub is really about life stories and confessions, then I guess this qualifies. I'm not here for sympathy. I'm not even here for forgiveness. I just need to get it out of my head and somewhere permanent. For context, my name's William. I'm not some criminal mastermind or career thug. At least I didn't start that way. At the time of this story, I was just a guy who needed money fast and had convinced himself that fast didn't have to mean dirty. Spoiler, it did. This happened years ago, during a stretch of my life where everything felt temporary: jobs, apartments, relationships, morals. I was drowning in debt, juggling late notices, and telling myself I'd fix it after one big break. The break, in my mind, was insurance money. A staged accident. Clean. Victimless. Just paperwork and patience. I'd heard stories. Everyone has. Friend of a friend totals a car, cashes a check, moves on. The way those stories get told, there's always this shrug at the end, like the universe just handed them a reset button. I wanted that shrug. I wanted the reset. The car was already old. The policy was solid. And I kept telling myself the same lie over and over: I'm not hurting anyone. It's just a system. Systems expect losses. That line felt smart at the time. Almost ethical, if you squinted. I didn't wake up one morning thinking, today I'd become a criminal. It felt more like sliding down a hill you didn't realize was steep until your feet stopped working. By the time I admitted what I was planning, I was already planning it. What I didn't understand, what I couldn't understand yet, was that the moment you decide to fake an accident, you stop controlling the variables. And once that happens, things don't just go wrong. They get personal. Anyway, that's the backstory. That's the version of me who thought this would be quick, quiet, and forgettable. It wasn't. Once the idea took root, it didn't feel reckless anymore. It felt organized. Rational. That's the dangerous part, I think. I didn't spiral into this, I structured it. I started by doing what any anxious, overthinking idiot does: I researched. Not in a how to commit insurance fraud way, I wasn't that blatant, but in a sideways, cowardly way. Reading forums. Skimming articles about accident claims. Looking for phrases like total loss and no fault and payout timeline. I told myself this was just being informed. Adults are informed, right? The car helped justify everything. It was already on its last legs. Weird noises, peeling paint, that smell that never really goes away no matter how much you clean the upholstery. I'd been driving it like it was borrowed time anyway. In my head, I wasn't destroying something valuable. I was retiring it. I remember standing in the parking lot one night, just staring at it under a flickering streetlight. I actually patted the hood like you do to a dog before leaving it at the vet. I said out loud, "You're doing me a favor." That should have been my first real warning sign. The story I built around the accident came next. That was weirdly intimate, like writing bad fiction about my own life. Where I'd be going. What time. Why I'd be distracted. I needed it to sound boring. Real accidents are boring. That was my logic. I also practiced my emotions, which sounds insane now that I'm typing it. I'd imagine the call afterward, voice shaking but not too much, confused but cooperative. I ran lines in my head like an actor who didn't know he was auditioning for consequences. The scariest part? There was a thrill under all of it. A quiet buzz. Like I'd unlocked a cheat code nobody else was brave enough to use. Every step I planned made me feel calmer, more in control, like I was finally steering my life instead of reacting to it. I told myself I'd stop if it felt wrong. It didn't feel wrong yet. Planning eventually stopped being something I did and started being something I lived in. Every idle moment got hijacked by the same loop. What if this happens? What if someone sees? What if I forget a detail? I wasn't sleeping much, But I told myself that was just stress from being broke. Convenient lie. I picked a date that felt invisible. Nothing special about it. No holidays, no bad weather, no reason anyone would remember it. I wanted the accident to blend into the background noise of the world. Just another Tuesday someone skimmed past on a report. I drove the route ahead of time. Not in a creepy way, at least that's what I told myself, but in a being prepared way. I noted where the road dipped, where the lighting got bad, where people usually sped up. I wasn't looking for drama. I was looking for plausible boredom. There were rules I made for myself. That's how I knew I was serious. Rules like, don't involve anyone else, don't make it look intentional, don't improvise. I treated it like a checklist you tape to a fridge. Follow the steps, get the result. Easy. I even cleaned out the car beforehand. That part messed with me more than I expected. Tossing receipts, empty bottles, random junk I'd let pile up. It felt like erasing evidence, sure, but it also felt like erasing me. Like I was stripping the car down to a prop instead of something I'd lived in. I told one person a half-truth. Just enough to cover my tracks. Something vague about running errands later than usual. I hated myself for how casual I sounded. Like I was borrowing a pen, not setting up a lie that could blow back on me. The night before, I sat on my couch and kept flipping my phone face down, then face up, waiting for something. A sign, maybe? Or a spike of fear big enough to stop me. It never came. Just this steady, humming certainty that I'd already crossed the point of no return. That's the thing no one tells you, preparation doesn't feel like danger. It feels like momentum. And once you have momentum, stopping feels harder than crashing. The day of the accident didn't arrive with thunder or dread. It was stupidly normal. That almost threw me off more than panic would have. I woke up, brushed my teeth, drank bad coffee. My hands weren't shaking. My stomach wasn't in knots. I remember thinking, guess I'm calmer than I expected. That should have scared me. It didn't. I got dressed like I always did, nothing memorable, nothing that would stick in someone's mind later. I even hesitated over my jacket for a second, wondering if it would look suspicious in hindsight. That's where my brain was at, already imagining the rewind, already defending myself to ghosts. When I got in the car, there was this brief, absurd urge to turn on the radio. Like music would make it feel more routine, more real. I didn't. Silence felt appropriate. Heavy, but appropriate. The drive itself was almost meditative. I stuck to the speed I'd rehearsed, hands at 10 and 2 like I was suddenly auditioning to be a model driver. Every stoplight felt like a checkpoint I passed without incident. I kept thinking, this is it. Any second now. But the world refused to acknowledge how important this was supposed to be. As I got closer to the spot I'd picked, my body finally caught up with my brain. My mouth went dry. My heartbeat started doing this uneven stutter that made it hard to focus. I remember laughing under my breath, this short, sharp sound, because it felt ridiculous to be scared of something I'd engineered. There was a moment, right before it happened, where I could have bailed. Taken a wrong turn. Claimed a migraine. Driven home and pretended this was all just a bad idea I flirted with and abandoned. That moment lasted maybe half a second. Then momentum did what momentum does. I adjusted my grip on the steering wheel. Took one long breath. And committed. I wish I could say I felt brave right then. Or clever. Or justified. What I felt was empty, like I'd stepped off a ledge and my emotions hadn't caught up yet. I won't get into the exact mechanics of how I did it. Not because I'm protecting anyone, just because the details don't matter as much as the feeling. What matters is that once I crossed that line, the world snapped from quiet to chaos in a way I wasn't prepared for. The sound came first. Not the cinematic crunch you hear in movies, but this ugly, tearing noise that felt like it came from inside my chest instead of the car. My body reacted before my brain did. Everything jolted. My teeth slammed together. The air punched out of my lungs like it had a personal grudge. For a split second, there was nothing. No thought. No plan. Just white noise and this awful pressure behind my eyes. Then reality rushed back and all at once, messy and loud and impossible to pause. The car stopped moving. I didn't. At least, it felt that way. My hands were still locked on the wheel like they didn't trust me to let go. I remember blinking hard, over and over, checking for blood. That was instinct. Not guilt. Not fear. Just survival. Then came the smell. Hot, sharp, wrong. It's amazing how fast your brain starts screaming this wasn't part of the plan when something smells wrong. People noticed. Of course they did. Doors opened. Voices cut through the fog, shocked, curious, alarmed. Someone yelled, "Hey!" like they weren't sure if I was alive or just rude. I hadn't rehearsed the sound of strangers rushing toward me, their concern colliding with my lie. I fumbled for my phone with hands that suddenly didn't feel like mine. I remember thinking I needed to look dazed, but not too dazed. Hurt, but not injured. The math of it all fell apart instantly. My body was doing its own thing, and it did not care about the script I'd written. When someone knocked on my window and asked if I was okay, I opened my mouth and nothing came out. Not because I was acting, because my brain lagged behind the moment. That's when it hit me, harder than the impact itself. This wasn't a story anymore. It was an event. Other people were inside it now. And I couldn't rewind. Once the door was opened, everything sped up in the worst way. Hands I didn't recognize were suddenly everywhere, steadying me, asking questions, telling me not to move like I was a child who'd fallen off a bike. Someone kept saying my name, which freaked me out because I didn't remember telling anyone what it was. Turns out I had. Apparently I was more functional than I felt. I nodded a lot. Shook my head when it seemed appropriate. Every response felt half a beat too slow, like I was watching myself from behind glass. I could hear my own voice sounding thin and strange, explaining things I'd practiced explaining, but now they came out crooked. Too many details here, not enough there. I could practically feel the lie wobbling. An ambulance showed up. Lights, sirens, the whole production. I hadn't planned for that. I kept thinking, this is getting expensive, which is a disgusting thought to have while people are checking your pupils. Guilt flickered brief but sharp, then got buried under adrenaline. When an officer finally spoke to me, calm and professional, my heart dropped into my stomach. This was the moment I'd imagined 100 times, and somehow still wasn't ready for. The officer's questions were simple, which somehow made them harder. Where was I headed? Had I been on my phone? Did I remember what happened right before the accident? Each one felt like a wire I had to step over without tripping an alarm. I stuck to the script, but the script felt flimsy now, like wet paper. I leaned hard into confusion. Not fake confusion, there was plenty of the real stuff sloshing around in my head, but I shaped it, aimed it. I kept saying things like, I think, and maybe, and I'm not sure. Uncertainty became my shield. People don't expect precision from someone who just wrecked their car. Still, I could feel eyes on me. Not accusing, exactly, but curious. One guy who'd stopped to help kept hovering nearby, arms crossed, watching like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Every time our eyes met, my chest tightened. I wondered what he saw when he looked at me. A victim? An idiot? A liar? I hated how badly I wanted his approval. By the time they let me sit on the curb, the adrenaline was draining out of me fast, leaving this shaky, hollow feeling behind. My legs felt borrowed. Someone wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and said it was for shock. I nodded like that explained everything. I replayed my answers in my head obsessively. Did I say the time wrong? Did I hesitate too long before answering about the route? Every pause suddenly felt suspicious. I started overcorrecting, adding little clarifications no one asked for. That's when I realized I needed to shut up. The officer stepped away to talk to someone else, and the silence got loud. Too loud. I watched my car get loaded onto a truck, bent and sad and unmistakably real. It hit me then, this wasn't just a form I'd fill out later. There would be records. Reports. A version of this day written by other people. A paramedic asked if I had anyone to call. I almost laughed. Who do you call when the person you're afraid of is yourself? I thought once I was cleared medically, the worst part would be over. Then I'd go home, sleep it off, start the paperwork, and ride the slow wave toward a check. Instead, the universe decided to improvise. As they were finishing up, another officer showed up, different vibe. Older. Quieter. He didn't rush. He just stood there for a second, looking at the scene like he was reading between lines instead of words. When he asked me to walk him through it again, my mouth went dry. This time, he interrupted. Not aggressively. Casually. You said earlier you were coming from the east. Pause. This road doesn't really make sense for that. My heart kicked hard enough to hurt. I tried to correct myself, then realized correcting myself made it worse. I felt sweat crawl down my spine despite the cold. He nodded slowly, like he wasn't convinced but wasn't ready to push either. That's when it sank in. I wasn't dealing with a system. I was dealing with people. And people notice patterns. After that comment about the road, I went into damage control mode. Not smoothly. Desperately. I leaned harder into the I'm shaken angle, rubbed my temples, apologized for being confused. I even said the words head rush, which felt like a get-out-of-jail phrase at the time. The older officer watched me do it, expression unreadable. They separated me for a bit. Standard procedure, they said. Standard felt like a threat. Sitting alone, I started bargaining with myself. If this works, I'm done. I'll take the payout and disappear. I'll be better. Like the universe cared about my promises now. Eventually, they let me go home. No cuffs. No accusations. Just a thin smile and a someone may follow up. That sentence stuck to me like tar. At home, the quiet was unbearable. Every sound felt like a knock at the door that hadn't happened yet. I drafted the insurance report and deleted it 3 times. The story still worked on paper, but now I knew how fragile paper is. The days after were worse than the accident itself. There's a special kind of torture in waiting for consequences you may or may not deserve. Every unknown number made my stomach flip. Every car slowing outside my apartment sounded like authority. The insurance adjuster called first. Friendly voice, practiced empathy. He asked me to walk him through it. Again. I gave the same version, cleaner this time, but I could hear myself over-explaining. Filling space. He hummed thoughtfully, typed things I couldn't see. When he said, "Okay, we'll be in touch," it didn't feel like relief. It felt like being put back on hold with my own life. I started second-guessing everything. Did that witness give a statement? Did the older officer write something extra in his notes? I replayed his pause over the road choice like it was a crime scene photo burned into my brain. Sleep got weird. Shallow. I'd wake up convinced I'd confessed to someone in a dream and just forgotten. The money was supposed to fix my problems. Instead, it made me afraid to open my email. The call came on a Thursday afternoon, which felt unfairly mundane. I remember because I was microwaving leftovers and thinking about nothing in particular. The phone buzzed, unknown number, and my appetite vanished like a switch had been flipped. It wasn't the police. It was the insurance company, but not the adjuster. This guy introduced himself as part of a special investigations unit, which is a phrase that sounds fake until it's aimed directly at you. He was polite. Calm. Almost apologetic. That somehow made it worse. He said there were a few inconsistencies. They wanted to clarify. Nothing accusatory. Just questions. Again. He mentioned witness statements. Dashcam footage from a nearby car. When he said that, My legs actually gave out and I had to sit on the floor. I answered carefully, but I could feel the ground shifting under every word. The story still technically held, but now it was under a microscope. When he ended the call with, "We'll be following up," I realized something important. Getting away with it wasn't about one perfect lie. It was about surviving 1,000 small doubts. After that call, the story stopped feeling like something I was telling and started feeling like something that was dragging me behind it. I couldn't adjust it anymore without breaking it. Any change would ripple backward, contradict something already written down by someone else. The lie had a paper trail now. A spine. I got invited, to come in and clarify a few things. Office building, neutral walls, bad coffee. 2 people this time. Still polite. Still calm. They slid printed photos across the table like they were playing cards. My car. The road. A timestamp that didn't care how nervous I was. They didn't accuse me. They didn't need to. They just asked me to explain the parts that didn't fit. I felt exposed in a way I didn't know was possible, like my thoughts were louder than my voice. I stuck to the story, but my conviction was gone. I could hear it thinning. Walking out, I realized the worst part wasn't fear of being caught. It was knowing I'd become someone who could sit there and keep lying anyway. Nothing dramatic happened after that meeting. No arrest. No slammed doors. Just distance. Emails that took longer to come back. Calls that stopped altogether. The insurance company eventually sent a letter saying the claim was denied pending further review. Not denied. Just suspended in limbo, like me. I should have felt relieved. I wasn't in handcuffs. My name wasn't in a database I could see. But the truth is, that letter crushed me more than a charge might have. All that risk, all that fear, and I didn't even get the thing I told myself would make it worth it. The car was gone. Towed, processed, written off in a way that benefited everyone except me. I took on more debt just to replace it with something barely functional. Life didn't reset. It narrowed. What stuck with me most was how easily I slid back into normal routines. Work, groceries, small talk, while carrying this secret like a second spine. I'd crossed a line and discovered something uncomfortable. You don't need to be punished to be changed. Sometimes you just have to see yourself clearly once. I didn't get the payout. I didn't get arrested. I didn't get closure in any neat, story-friendly way. What I got was quieter and heavier, a permanent before and after line in my head. Before, I thought morality was flexible under pressure. After, I know it's more like a muscle. You either use it or you watch it atrophy. I learned that calling something victimless is just a way to avoid naming the victim as yourself. I lost sleep, trust in my own instincts, and a version of myself that believed shortcuts stayed short. I also learned that fear doesn't always show up screaming. Sometimes it just moves in and starts rearranging the furniture. If you're reading this because you're desperate and considering something small to fix something big, here's my advice: stop and sit with the discomfort a little longer. Debt, shame, failure, those things are loud, but they're honest. Lies are quiet, and they echo forever. I still think about that day more than I should. Not because of the crash, but because of how easy it was to decide to cause it.